In this video, I'm going to be attempting 3 different CSS challenges on the website CSS Battle, but there's a catch. They are going to be increasing in difficulty with each challenge, and I won't be able to see what I am doing as I work on them, so I won't be able to see the expected output at all. I'll try to edit it in a way that you all can see what I am doing, but for me, all I can see is the code until I complete my solution. So here in CSS Battle, we can see we have our editor, my current output, as well as the target. But what I'm going to do is just get rid of this output. So let's inspect here, and let's come up to the target container, and we can simply say we want display none. So that is going to remove that, and we can add it back in when we are finished. So for this first challenge, we need to have 4 different rows, each with a circle or with a number of circles. So 4 circles, 3 circles, 2 circles, and then 1 circle. So let's create a div with, let's say, the class of circle. And we need these circles to have some size. I don't know the exact numbers because it doesn't give us those numbers, but let's say that these are about 50 pixels by 50 pixels, and they are this background color here. So we can delete this, and we can add in this background color. And then we need to make sure they are actual circles. So we can say we have a border radius of 50%. Okay, so now I think that should create the circles that we need, but then we need to have all of these different rows of the circles. So we can wrap this circle in a div. So let's say we have some div like this. And let's say that the div has a class as well. So we can say class equals container. And this div for the first row is going to have 4 different circles. And then we can say that we want the container class, as well as I think I need to change this from just div to be the class of circle because we don't want this selector to also affect the container. So now for the container, we want to align the items in a row. So we can say display flex, and the flex direction will be row by default. So we can leave that, and we need to add some space between them. So let's add a gap of, let's say, maybe 10 pixels between each circle. It's hard for me to know the exact number, but I think that should work. And then we need to create different containers. So we have 4 different rows. So we can say we have 4 of these containers, each with 1 less circle than the previous one. So the bottom one will only have 1 circle in it. And then we need to add some space vertically between each container, as well as there's some space from the edges of the body. So let's just add some margin here. I don't know the number again, but let's say we have maybe 20 pixels of margin on each of these containers. And I think that should actually do it. So we have all of these circles, each with a width and a height of 50 pixels, the background color, and the border radius. Oh, I also need to add the background color to the body. So we can say body, background, and that will be this color. So now we have the body with the background color. We have all of these circles. Yeah, I think I'm good with this. So let's lock in this answer. So I'm going to inspect the page again, come to that div that we hid. So it should be somewhere in here. I believe it's this one. Yes, it is. So we can add the display none or remove it. And that actually looks pretty close. So I'm pretty happy with this. This was, again, the easiest of the problems we will do. Let's submit this and see how close we actually were. So I don't actually know exactly how that score is calculated, but it looks like we have an 86% match. And most of the issue is just that my circles are too big, and it looks like I don't have enough gap between them, but I'm pretty happy with that one. So let's move on to the second problem. So this one, again, is going to be more difficult than previous, but this is the expected output over here. We can see we have a bunch of different lines and things with different colors and of different, essentially, shape, or essentially making different shapes. So what I'm going to do is inspect this, and then let's remove this again. So I think we did the target container. That worked out pretty well. So we can say display none. So now that is gone. And let's start creating this output. So let's start with the body by adding this body color. So let's remove this, say body. We want the background to be this color. Okay, so that should get us the background color. And now we need to create these different shapes. And the way I look at this is essentially that we have 2 different rectangles And then we have these this big vertical line and this bigger horizontal line. But we essentially just have these two rectangles and their borders, and there's nothing inside of those rectangles. So let's start with the inner rectangle. So I'm going to say div id equals inner, and let's close out that div. And this inner rectangle is going to have some width, and it looks like the entire width of the rectangle is going to be, well, the inner part of the rectangle is sort of like a unit of 3, and that's 3 times the width of each border. So let's say that the border is going to be, I don't know how to actually choose a number here. 50 was too big last time, so let's go with something a little bit smaller. So let's say we have inner, and we want inner to first of all have a width and a height, and then we have this border. So let's say the border is going to be maybe 25 pixels solid, and we need, I believe, this color. So 25 pixels solid and this color. And that means that we have 50 pixels total of sort of size for this rectangle, but then we need to add 3 times the border width for the inner size. So that means that inside is going to be 75. So we will have a width of 75 pixels, and I might be completely messing up this math, but I hope this makes sense. So then we need to add some amount of height. It's hard to know exactly how much, but let's say we have a height of maybe 250 pixels. Or let's say, that seems like a lot, let's go 200 pixels. And then we need to center it, and we need to sort of move it up. So I'm going to use position absolute. So we can say position absolute, and we want a left value of 50%, but to center it, we need to also account for the width. So we can say transform, and this will be translate x negative 50%. Okay, so that should be horizontally centered, and then we just need to move it up. So let's say the top value is going to be negative, and we want to move it up at least the size of this border. So let's say negative 25 pixels, and hopefully that should work. And then we need to create this next rectangle. So I'm going to create another one. I'm actually just going to put this at the top level since we're using position absolute. It doesn't really matter. So we can say that this is outer, and I'm going to copy inner to create outer. So let's copy this down here, and we can say we have outer as well. And this will work pretty much the same thing, but the inner width is now going to be the same as what we had plus double the border on each side. So the border is 25 pixels, so 50 pixels for each side. So that means the total width should be 100 extra pixels, I believe. So let's say a width of 175 pixels. And then we want the border to be the same width, it looks like, but we have a different color. So the color is going to be this one. So let's copy this and paste it there. And I think that actually should pretty much work. I'm not obviously completely confident, but I think it should work. Maybe we need more height. Yeah, I guess we do need more height because we need the height to now be an extra, it looks like another 50 pixels. So let's say the height is 250. So we have 250 height, 175 width. Let's see, is that 175 correct? So that should be for each of these little gaps. We're saying these are each 25 pixels. So the width should be 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150, 175. Yep. So I think 75 width should work. And now we just need the vertical line and this horizontal line. So let's create the horizontal one first. So I'll call this div id equals horizontal. And let's copy this again. And now for horizontal, let's see. I think I just did HORZ. Is that what I did? Yeah, HORZ. So for this one, let's see. We want to have we still want it centered, so this is good. We want the width to be essentially that same width, 175, plus we need to add 50 more pixels. So let's say this is going to be 225. And then we want the height in this case to be 25 pixels. And instead of using border, we can just use a background color. So we can say background, and the background will be this color here. And then instead of a top value, we want a bottom value, I guess, or we could do a top value and move it, make this be a positive top value. So we know the height of outer is going to be 250 pixels plus this 25, so that's 275. So let's say that this is 300 pixels from the top. And then we just need the vertical line last. So let's say div ID is going to be vert. And let's copy our horizontal line. And let's create a vertical line. So we can say, instead of hors, we will have vert. So with the vertical line, we need to have the width of this line be the 25 pixels, and the height is going to be 100%. The background color is going to be this middle one. So we can do this, and it looks like we have a missing semicolon here. So good to check that. And let's see, so we have the right, we don't need a top value at all, so we can just leave that. So this should take up the whole space. I guess we might need to remove margin from the body. So let's say the body has margin 0. I'm not actually sure if CSS Battle removes that for you or not, but for the full height, I think we might need that. So let's do that. And yeah, I think that should work. Let's see. Oh, we also need to worry about this overlapping. So this vertical bar is sort of on top of everything. I'm not sure what it's going to do by default, but let's just add a z-index to be safe. So we can say z-index is going to be 1. Okay, so I think I'm good with that. So let's inspect again and make it so that we can see the output. So let's open up here. Here it is, display none, we can remove. Okay, so I think we did pretty well with this. Everything's just way too big. So I'll go ahead and submit it to see how close we are. I don't think it's going to be super close because we can't even see the horizontal bar because of how big I made everything. So let's try real quick just to make everything less tall, just to see if we got everything mostly right without the height. So we can make inner, say, make everything 100 pixels shorter. And then the horizontal line will need to move its top value down by 200 pixels. Yeah, so I think we had that pretty much right, just the sizing was obviously off. But now let's move on to the final problem. And this one I think is going to be by far the hardest, so we can see the expected output over here. It's this sort of circle with circles inside of it, and then it's got these like semi-circle things on the outside, so this one's going to be pretty difficult. But let's see what we can do. So let's inspect, and once again, I will hide this. I think it was this one we were hiding. So we can say display none. Okay. So now let's go ahead and get started. So let's start by creating this main circle. So we can say div with the ID of, let's call this the container. And we can say we will select our container, and we need some width and height for it. Let's say 200 by 200. And we need the background color, which is this red color. So we will paste that there. Okay, and then we also need a border radius of 50% to make it a circle. It looks like it also has a border. I can't tell. Yeah, I think there's a black border. So we can say there's a border, maybe 5 pixels, solid black. Okay, so now we have the border, we have the circle. We need to actually center it. So let's select the body, and we can say display flex, justify content is going to be center, and align items center. Okay, so that should center the circle. We also need this background color on the body. So we can say not body, we want background to be this color. Okay, so I think that should create the circle. Now let's create these circles in the middle of the circle. So let's, inside of our container, let's create another div. So this one will be div ID. We can call this inner. And let's close out that div. I guess we can do this on one line like this. So inner is going to be a circle as well. So we can just copy container essentially to make our inner circle. So instead of container, we will have inner. And let's say this is going to be maybe 50 pixels by 50 pixels. The background color of the inner circle is black. The border radius, again, 50%. And then it has that orange circle around the inner circle. So we can do that with a border. Maybe let's say this is, I don't know, is 10 pixels enough? I'll go with 10 pixels, solid, and let's do this color. Okay, so that should give us the orange, but then there's a black circle around the inner circle. So let's let's just add another div around inner. So we can say div ID equals inner container. And let's close out this div. And then let's paste this inner div inside of here. Okay, so now the inner container, we can make another circle. So we can say inner container. And this one is also going to be a circle, but it's going to be bigger. So let's say this one is maybe 100 pixels by 100 pixels. And the background for this is black, border radius, and this one has no border. So we can remove that. But then we need to make sure that we are still doing the centering correct because we have more divs. So we have our container is centered inside of the body, which is the main circle. And then we need to center the circles inside of here. So we can say, let's just copy this to center everything inside of the container. And then we need to, within the inner container, center inner. So we can do the same thing here. Okay. So now I think we should have everything centered. And now we just need these sort of semicircle things on the edges. So let's start by making the one at the top. So, or the top left one, I should say, I guess. So let's say div ID equals top left. And let's see, how can we do this? So I think we want to make a circle with no background color and a border. And then we want to use overflow so that it doesn't go outside of the main container circle. So let's come down here and say ID of top left. Okay, so we want this to be a circle. So let's say we have a width, maybe 100 pixels, a height, 100 pixels, border radius of 50%, and then we need a black border. So border, maybe 10 pixels. Yeah, because it's the same width as the orange, it looks like. So we can say 10 pixels, solid black. Okay, so now we should have this circle, but we need to somehow sort of put it at the top left, and then we need to deal with overflow. So let's make this actually position absolute. So we can say position absolute, and then we will make the container be position relative. Okay, so now we want this to sort of just be at the top, I think. So let's say top 0. Maybe we want it a little bit lower than that. I'm not actually sure. Let's go with 0, and then we want a left value, and we want the left value to be, let's see, if it's 0, would it be outside of the circle, or would it be inside? I think it would be inside. I think we want left to be negative, so let's say something like negative 20 pixels. Hopefully that works, and then let's take the container and say overflow hidden so that it can't overflow. And then we just need to create 3 more of these for the top, or 2 more for the top right and for the bottom one. So let's say we have top right as well as bottom. And then let's copy this div 2 times so we can have top right and bottom. And let's fix that a little bit. Okay, so top right should be the same thing, but instead of left, we would have right. And then bottom should also be the same thing, but this one's going to be horizontally centered. So let's say left is going to be 50%, and then we want transform, translate x, negative 50%. So that should horizontally center it. And then we want a bottom value of, I guess, a negative value here as well. So let's say negative 20 pixels. Yeah, I think that should work. Yeah, I think I'm decently confident in this. I think these circles are going to be wildly just like the wrong size, and this also is just super unclean code, but I'm going to leave it as it is. So let's inspect and see how we did. I'm a little bit scared to look at this, but let's see how we did. So turn this off. Okay. We got the middle part like almost completely correct, it seems. Yeah, the middle part's like almost perfect. But these circles are way off. So this bottom, let's see, should this not have been negative? No. Where is the bottom one, like, at all? Let's see, is something wrong with this one? I'm just curious. Well, first, let's go ahead and submit it to see what we got. I think the score is going to actually, we ended up with a 91% match, but I don't think that necessarily is indicative of how well I actually did on this. So I'm curious what's wrong with bottom. Oh, this is called top bottom here. So this should be bottom. Okay. So if we do that, it looks like it's pretty much correct, other than these borders are not thick enough, and then these circles are just too big. I guess I probably could have calculated like how big they needed to be. But anyways, I think we did pretty decent. So do let me know what you thought of this video. If you thought this was an interesting idea, I can do more of these. This is pretty different than what I've done on my channel so far. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.